Everything you've been taught about karma is only half true. Yes, what you sow, you reap. Yes, every action has consequences. Yes, the universe maintains balance. But there's something above karma, something more powerful, something that can dissolve lifetimes of debt in an instant. And the spiritual community doesn't want to talk about it. Because if everyone knew this secret, the entire karma industry, past life regression to clear karma, karmic healing sessions, karma coaching, would collapse overnight. Edgar Cayce discovered this secret, and it troubled him. As a devout Christian reading for people about their past lives and karma, he kept encountering something that shouldn't exist according to Eastern philosophy. Souls who should have been suffering their karma, but weren't. Souls who had committed terrible acts in past lives, but were living blessed current lives. Souls who had somehow stepped outside the wheel of cause and effect. They had discovered what Cayce came to call the law of grace, a law that supersedes karma the way federal law supersedes state law. A law that says, once you truly learn the lesson, you don't need to experience the consequence. Once you genuinely understand, the universe doesn't need to teach you through suffering. Once you embody the wisdom, the debt is cancelled. Today, you learn how to stop being karma's victim and become Grace's student. How to transform your karma from a prison sentence into a graduation ceremony. How to invoke the law that's higher than karma and available to everyone, but used by almost no one because they don't know it exists. The game changes when you realize karma isn't your judge. It's your teacher. And like any good teacher, once you demonstrate you've learned the lesson, it lets you skip the test. The discovery that shattered Eastern philosophy. Edgar Cayce grew up Christian. When he started giving past life readings, he was disturbed. The Bible didn't talk about reincarnation, but the information coming through him was undeniable. Detailed past lives that explained current conditions, karmic connections that clarified relationships, ancient patterns that illuminated present problems. But then he discovered something that disturbed him even more. Something that didn't fit Eastern philosophy or Western religion. There were souls, Cayce revealed in Reading 28032, who by all karmic law should have been experiencing severe consequences. Past lives filled with cruelty that should have resulted in current suffering, ancient debts that should have demanded payment. But these souls were living blessed lives. They had somehow stepped outside karma's jurisdiction. How was this possible? Had karma failed? Was the universe unjust? The answer came in a profound revelation. There is a law higher than karma. Call it grace, call it mercy, call it divine love. This law says that understanding transcends experience. That wisdom gained through consciousness doesn't require suffering. That love dissolves debt more effectively than payment. One case that stunned Cayce involved a woman living a beautiful, blessed life, loving family, good health, prosperity, peace. But when he read her past life, he discovered she had been a cruel Roman governor who had tortured early Christians. By karmic law, she should have been experiencing torture herself. Where is her karma? The person requesting the reading asked. Cayce's response revolutionized understanding of spiritual law. Between that life and this, she spent a lifetime in deep spiritual contemplation, understanding the pain she'd caused, feeling it fully in consciousness, transforming from the inside out. She learned the lesson karma was trying to teach without needing to experience the suffering. Grace intervened. The debt was marked paid in full, not through suffering, but through understanding. Karma is a school, not a prison. Here's what changes everything. Karma isn't punishment, it's education. And like any educational system, if you can demonstrate mastery without taking the class, you can test out. Karma Cayce explained, is the universe's remedial education system. If you hurt others, you experience hurt. Not as punishment, but so you understand what hurt feels like. If you abandon others, you experience abandonment. Not as revenge, but so you understand isolation. If you abuse power, you experience powerlessness, not as justice, but so you understand vulnerability. But here's the secret. If you can learn the lesson without the experience becomes unnecessary. If you can gain the understanding without the suffering is cancelled. If you can embody the wisdom without the pain is lifted. Think about what this means. That ancient karma you're carrying, those past life debts you're paying, that generational trauma you're healing, you don't necessarily need to suffer through it all. You can learn the lesson directly, embody the understanding immediately, and have the karma dissolve through grace. Cayce gave a profound reading for a man born with a deformed leg. Past life, karma showed he had been a soldier who deliberately crippled prisoners. Traditional karma says he needed to experience being crippled to understand what he had inflicted. But Cayce revealed another option. If this soul can truly understand, not intellectually but in his heart, the pain he caused, if he can feel genuine remorse and commit to healing rather than harming, if he can transform his consciousness completely, the leg can heal. Not through medical intervention, but through grace intervention. The karma will be marked complete, not through suffering, but through transformation. The man spent months in deep meditation, genuinely feeling the pain of those he had harmed in past lives, transforming his consciousness from one who could harm to one who could only heal. His leg began improving. Doctors couldn't explain it, but Cayce could. Grace had superseded karma. The mathematics of grace versus karma. Cayce revealed something stunning about how these two laws operate. Karma is mathematical. Action equals reaction. Cause equals effect. What goes out comes back. It's precise, predictable, mechanical. But grace is exponential. One moment of genuine understanding can dissolve centuries of karma. One instant of true forgiveness can cancel lifetimes of debt. One choice to love unconditionally can override eons of conditional patterns. Karma counts every deed, Cayce explained. Grace counts only consciousness. Karma says you must experience what you caused. Grace says if you understand what you caused, experience becomes optional. Karma is the law of Moses, eye for eye. Grace is the law of Christ, forgiveness 70 times 7. In Reading 1436-3, Cayce described a soul who had accumulated what should have been dozens of lifetimes' worth of karmic debt through repeated patterns of betrayal across centuries. This soul had betrayed lovers, friends, business partners, even family members across multiple incarnations. By karmic mathematics, this soul should have experienced betrayal after betrayal for lifetimes to come. But something different happened. In deep meditation, this soul suddenly understood, not thought about, but truly understood, why they had betrayed others. They saw their own fear, their own wound, their own desperate attempt to leave before being left. In that moment of profound understanding, Cayce revealed, lifetimes of karma dissolved, not paid through suffering but transcended through consciousness. The soul didn't need to be betrayed dozens of times to learn not to betray. They learned it directly, immediately, completely through grace. Why some people don't experience their karma. This explains something that has puzzled people forever. Why do some terrible people live wonderful lives? Why do some saints suffer tremendously? Why does karma seem to work for some but not others? The answer isn't that karma is broken or unjust. It's that some souls are operating under grace rather than karma, and others are choosing karma rather than grace. Every soul, Cayce revealed, has the choice moment by moment. Will I learn through karma or through grace? Will I understand through suffering or through consciousness? Will I pay my debts through experience or through transformation? Most souls choose karma unconsciously. They resist the lesson, so they must experience the consequence. They refuse understanding, so they must gain it through suffering. They reject consciousness expansion, so they must expand through painful experience. But some souls, and this is the secret, choose grace. They lean into the lesson before the test. They seek understanding before consequence arrives. They transform their consciousness before karma can teach them through suffering. Cayce documented a fascinating case of two souls who had been enemies in ancient Egypt, one having murdered the other in a power struggle. They reincarnated in 20th century America. By karma, they should have been enemies again, one harming the other. But one soul had spent the interim between lives, understanding, transforming, genuinely changing. When they met in this life, instead of enemies, they became best friends. The soul who had been the murderer became the protector, the helper, the devoted friend. The murdered soul asked Cayce, "Where is the karma? Shouldn't they be hurting me?" Cayce's answer was profound. The karma was dissolved through grace. Your former enemy learned the lesson in consciousness between lives. They don't need to hurt you to understand that hurting you was hurting themselves. They learned it through grace. And now, instead of karma playing out as repeated harm, grace is playing out as devoted love. The forgiveness loophole. Here's the most powerful secret Cayce revealed about escaping karma. Forgiveness is Grace's activation code. Not forgiveness as a concept, but forgiveness as a frequency, a vibration, a complete release. When you truly forgive, Cayce explained, you step outside karma's jurisdiction. When you genuinely release all resentment, all need for justice, all demand for balance, you move from karma's courtroom to Grace's classroom. And in Grace's classroom, lessons are learned through love, not pain. But here's the catch. It must be genuine forgiveness, not conceptual forgiveness. You can't just say, "I forgive," while your cells still hold resentment. You can't declare forgiveness while secretly waiting for karma to punish them. True forgiveness means releasing all energetic attachment to the harm, all emotional charge around the wound, all need for any kind of balance or justice. In reading 3661, Cayce described a woman who had been sexually abused as a child. Past life reading revealed she had been an abuser in previous incarnations. By karma, she was experiencing what she had caused others to experience. But Cayce revealed something revolutionary. If you can forgive, truly, completely forgive, both your abuser and yourself, if you can see the pain that caused them to cause pain, if you can transform this wound into wisdom without bitterness, the karma completes instantly. Not through full payment, but through grace. The lesson is learned, the pattern is broken, the karma is dissolved. The woman spent years working on genuine forgiveness, not excusing the abuse, not pretending it didn't matter, but truly releasing all energetic attachment to it. When she finally achieved genuine forgiveness, her life transformed. Patterns that had plagued her for decades suddenly stopped. Relationships that had been impossible became effortless. The karma had been dissolved through grace. How to invoke grace over karma. So how do you actually do this? How do you step out of karma's grinding wheel and into grace's instant transformation? First, you must genuinely want to learn the lesson, not escape the consequence. Grace doesn't help you avoid karma. It helps you complete it through consciousness rather than suffering. If you're trying to escape the lesson, you're guaranteeing you'll learn it through pain. But if you genuinely want to understand, to grow, to transform, grace rushes in. Second, you must be willing to feel in consciousness what you would have felt in experience. If your karma is to experience abandonment because you abandoned others, you must be willing to fully feel, in meditation, in contemplation, in consciousness, what abandonment feels like. Not as suffering, but as understanding. Not as punishment, but as education. Third, you must forgive everyone and everything, including yourself. This isn't optional. Unforgiveness keeps you locked in karma's jurisdiction. Forgiveness moves you to Grace's dimension, and forgiveness must be genuine, cellular, complete, not just mental or emotional, but energetic. Fourth, you must embody the opposite of what created the karma. If you created karma through cruelty, you must embody kindness. If through greed, generosity. If through abandonment, loyalty. Not as penance, but as demonstration that you've learned, you've transformed, you've become someone who could never create that karma again. Finally, you must ask for grace. This isn't begging or pleading, but acknowledgement that you're ready to learn through love rather than pain, through consciousness rather than consequence, through grace rather than karma. The Christ example. Cayce, being Christian, often used Christ as the ultimate example of grace transcending karma. Christ on the cross, Cayce explained, wasn't paying karma. He was demonstrating grace, showing that one who is completely aligned with divine law can take on the karma of others and dissolve it through love. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Wasn't just words. It was grace activation that dissolved the karma of those crucifying him. This is the model. Not that someone else can pay your karma, but that you can activate the same grace Christ demonstrated. You can forgive so completely that karma dissolves. You can love so unconditionally that debt cancels. You can understand so profoundly that suffering becomes unnecessary. This is what Christ meant by, "I came to fulfill the law, not destroy it," Cayce revealed. Karma is the law, but grace fulfills it, completes it without the full payment. Like paying a debt with understanding rather than money. The debt is satisfied, but through a higher currency. The generational grace effect. One of the most powerful aspects of grace that Cayce revealed. When you dissolve karma through grace, you don't just free yourself, you free your entire lineage. Karma runs through bloodlines, Cayce explained. Generational patterns, family curses, inherited traumas, these are all karmic streams flowing through DNA. But when one family member invokes grace, truly transforms the pattern through consciousness rather than suffering, the entire lineage is affected. In Reading 2392, Cayce described a man who came from 7 generations of alcoholics. The karma was clear, addiction passing from father to son for centuries. Traditional karma said he would struggle with alcohol and pass it to his children, but this man chose grace. Instead of either succumbing to alcoholism or fighting it through willpower, he went deep into consciousness to understand why his lineage drank. He found the original wound, an ancestor who had lost everything and turned to alcohol to numb unbearable pain. He felt that ancestor's pain fully, forgave him completely, and transformed the pattern in consciousness. Not only did he never struggle with alcohol, but his children showed no signs of the addictive pattern. His siblings reported their cravings diminished. Even his father, late in life, suddenly lost interest in drinking. The entire lineage was freed because one member invoked grace over karma. This is how generational healing happens, Cayce revealed. Not through each generation suffering slightly less, but through one generation saying enough and dissolving the pattern through grace. Why grace isn't used more often? If grace is so powerful, why doesn't everyone use it? Why do most souls choose to learn through karma rather than grace? Cayce's answer was sobering. Because grace requires something harder than suffering. It requires genuine transformation. Most souls would rather experience the consequence than transform the consciousness. They'd rather pay the debt through pain than dissolve it through profound change. Think about it. To invoke grace over karma requires absolute honesty about what you've done or been. No rationalization, no justification, no victim consciousness. You must own fully what you've created while simultaneously forgiving yourself completely. This paradox breaks most egos. It also requires feeling the pain you've caused others, not as guilt, but as understanding. Most people would rather experience their own pain than truly feel what they've caused others to feel. It's easier to be punished than to truly comprehend the harm you've done. And it requires genuine forgiveness of those who've harmed you. Not surface forgiveness, but cellular release. Most souls would rather hold the resentment and wait for karma to balance the scales than release it completely and let grace handle the resolution. Grace is available to all, Cayce emphasized, but used by few because it requires the hardest thing, complete transformation of consciousness. Karma only requires endurance. Grace requires metamorphosis. The warning about premature grace. But Cayce also warned about trying to invoke grace prematurely, before genuine understanding has occurred. Some souls try to use grace as escape, he explained. They say the words of forgiveness without feeling them. They claim understanding without embodying it. They declare transformation without actually changing. This doesn't invoke grace. It actually intensifies karma. Why? Because now you're not just carrying the original karma, but also the karma of spiritual bypassing. You're not just unconscious. You're pretending to be conscious. You're not just unforgiving. You're pretending to forgive. Grace can't be faked, Cayce warned. The universe knows the difference between genuine transformation and conceptual understanding, between real forgiveness and performed forgiveness, between actual learning and pretended learning. In Reading 1885-2, he described someone who claimed to have forgiven childhood abuse but still carried deep resentment. They wondered why their karma wasn't dissolving despite their forgiveness. Cayce's response was direct. Saying you forgive isn't forgiving. Thinking you understand isn't understanding. Claiming grace isn't receiving grace. The transformation must be genuine, complete, cellular. Otherwise, you're still in karma's jurisdiction, just with added self-deception. The grace practices. Edgar Cayce provided specific practices for invoking grace over karma, for transforming karma from suffering into consciousness. The first practice is what he called conscious review. Every night, review your day, not for what happened, but for what karma you might have created. Then, immediately in consciousness, feel what others felt because of your actions. If you were impatient, feel what your impatience caused others to feel. If you were kind, feel the warmth you created. This conscious review prevents karma from solidifying. It's like cleaning a wound before it can get infected. The second practice is karmic meditation. Take any pattern you're struggling with and meditate not on solving it, but on understanding it. Where did this pattern begin? Not just in this life, but across lifetimes. What wound created it? What fear maintains it? Feel into the original cause with compassion, not judgment. Understanding dissolves karma faster than suffering. The third practice is preemptive forgiveness. Forgive in advance. Forgive everyone for everything they might do. Forgive yourself for everything you might become. This creates a grace field around you that karma can't penetrate. It's like being permanently in grace's jurisdiction rather than karma's. The fourth practice is conscious blessing. Bless those who've harmed you, not conceptually but energetically. Send genuine good to those who have sent harm. This reverses karma's flow. Instead of waiting to receive what you've given, you're actively giving the opposite of what you've received. Subscribe if you're ready to understand the law that transcends karma. Comment below with your experience of grace. Times when you learned the lesson without the suffering. When understanding dissolved consequence. When forgiveness freed you from karma's wheel. The ultimate secret. Here's the ultimate secret Cayce revealed about grace and karma. They're not really different laws. They're the same law operating at different frequencies. Karma is love teaching through consequence, Cayce explained. Grace is love teaching through consciousness. Both are love ensuring you learn what you need to evolve. The only difference is the method. External experience or internal understanding. This means karma isn't your enemy, and grace isn't playing favorites. The universe isn't punishing you through karma or rewarding you through grace. It's always only exclusively helping you learn what you need to learn for your soul's evolution. The question isn't whether you're under karma or grace. The question is, how do you prefer to learn? Through suffering or through consciousness, through experience or through understanding, through consequence or through transformation. Every moment, Cayce revealed, you're choosing. Every reaction is a vote for karma or grace. Every response is a decision to learn through pain or through love. Every choice is selecting your teacher, consequence or consciousness. The Grace Revolution. What would happen if everyone knew this? If everyone understood that karma isn't inevitable, that suffering isn't required, that lessons can be learned through grace rather than pain? It would revolutionize human evolution, Cayce predicted. Instead of generations slowly working through karma, passing trauma and patterns to their children, one generation could dissolve it all through grace. Instead of lifetimes of suffering to learn simple lessons, souls could learn instantly through consciousness. But he also knew why this knowledge has been hidden, why religions don't teach it, why even many spiritual teachers don't understand it. Because it requires taking absolute responsibility while simultaneously releasing all guilt. It requires owning everything while forgiving everything. It requires seeing clearly while loving unconditionally. Most souls aren't ready for grace, Cayce admitted. They need karma structure, its clear cause and effect, its predictable consequences. Grace requires spiritual maturity, the ability to learn without the lesson being forced, to grow without the pressure of pain, to evolve through choice rather than consequence. Your choice now. So here's your choice, available right now, in this moment. Will you continue learning through karma, or will you invoke grace? Will you pay your debts through suffering, or dissolve them through understanding? Will you repeat patterns until pain teaches you better, or will you transform them through consciousness? If you choose grace, understand what you're choosing. You're choosing the harder path that leads to faster freedom. You're choosing transformation over endurance, consciousness over consequence, understanding over experience. Start with one pattern, one karma, one debt you've been paying. Instead of waiting for karma to balance it through suffering, go directly into consciousness. Feel what needs to be felt. Understand what needs to be understood. Forgive what needs to be forgiven. Transform what needs to be transformed. Watch what happens when you truly learn the lesson without needing the consequence. Watch how karma dissolves, how patterns break, how generational curses end. Watch grace rush in where karma used to grind. The final truth. Edgar Cayce's greatest revelation about grace and karma is this: you were never meant to suffer forever. Karma was never meant to be eternal. The wheel of cause and effect was always meant to be a temporary teaching tool, not a permanent prison. Every soul, Cayce revealed, is destined to eventually transcend karma entirely, to graduate from the law of cause and effect to the law of love, to move from learning through consequence to creating through consciousness. Grace isn't cheating the system, it's graduating from it. It's not avoiding karma, it's completing it through a higher method. It's not escaping consequences, it's learning the lessons so thoroughly that consequences become unnecessary. The law of karma says, you must experience what you've caused. The law of grace says, unless you understand what you've caused. The law of karma says, every action has an equal reaction. The law of grace says, unless consciousness transforms the action before reaction is needed. The law of karma says, you reap what you sow. The law of grace says, unless you learn what you were meant to learn from sowing. Both laws are true. Both laws operate, but one is higher than the other, and you get to choose which law governs your life. Comment Grace below if you're ready to transcend karma through consciousness rather than suffering. Comment Learning if you're beginning to understand how this works. Let's see how many souls are ready to graduate from karma's classroom to Grace's laboratory. Share this with someone who's been suffering their karma and doesn't know Grace is available. Subscribe for more teachings about the laws that govern spiritual evolution. Remember, you don't have to suffer to learn. You don't have to experience to understand. You don't have to pay through pain what can be dissolved through love. Grace is available now, not as escape from learning, but as a higher method of learning. Not as avoidance of growth, but as accelerated growth through consciousness. The secret of grace isn't that it lets you avoid karma. It's that it lets you complete karma through transformation rather than suffering. And transformation is always just one genuine understanding away. One real forgiveness away. One true embodiment away. One grace activation away. The choice is yours. And it always has been.